Homes in Scottsdale are not selling the way people expect them to. And if you've been watching this market from the outside, it probably feels confusing. You may be hearing that demand is down, that buyers have disappeared, or that interest rates have completely frozen the market. And yet, when you actually look closer, people are still moving here. They are still touring homes, and they are still writing offers. So the real question is not whether Scottsdale is desirable, because it clearly still is. The real question is why so many homes are sitting, while others quietly sell without much noise at all. I want to walk you through what is actually going on in the Scottsdale housing market right now. Not the headline version, not the national narrative, but the behind-the-scenes dynamic that's shaping buyers' behavior, sellers' decisions, and pricing, especially if you are relocating here, buying a second home, or planning a long-term move. Because this market is not broken, it's recalibrating. And if you understand how that recalibration works, it completely changes how you should approach buying here. And because clarity matters so much right now, Scottsdale is one of those markets where surface level data can be incredibly misleading if you don't understand how buyers here actually think. Let's start with the biggest misconception driving this confusion. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make when looking at Scottsdale right now is assuming that homes are sitting because buyers cannot afford them. Now, that may be true in some markets, but it is not broadly true here. Most Scottsdale buyers are not stretching to qualify. They are not maxing out their debt-to-income ratios, and they are not trying to get in before it's too late. Instead, many of them are coming from higher cost locations, selling properties with substantial equity, or purchasing with a large down payment or all cash. And when those buyers slow down, it does not look like panic. It looks like patience. They are still watching, they are still tracking listings, and they are still paying attention to reductions and contract fallout. They are simply no longer rewarding prices that don't make sense. What changed is not demand itself. What changed is the buyer's willingness to absorb the risk on the seller's behalf. In other words, buyers are still here. They are just no longer doing sellers favors and overpaying for homes that are not worth it. Now, the single biggest reason why homes in Scottsdale are not selling right now has nothing to do with interest rates and everything to do with price anchoring. Many sellers are still emotionally anchored to the peak of our market. They remember what their neighbor's home sold for in 2022. They remember multiple offers. They remember buyers waiving appraisals, inspection gaps being ignored, and homes selling in a weekend. What they often do not account for is that those conditions were far from normal. They were the result of extreme scarcity paired with emotional urgency. They also often forget that was about 4 years ago, and that urgency is gone. Today's buyers are comparing homes not to just last year, but to other available options right now. They are looking at days on market, recent price reductions, and contract terms across entire submarkets. When a home is priced based on yesterday's momentum instead of today's alternatives, it does not trigger action, it triggers waiting. And waiting is exactly what buyers are comfortable doing right now. What most sellers don't realize is that buyers can spot overpricing immediately. They have already toured better homes. They have already seen what happens to listings that miss the mark. They understand leverage far better than sellers assume. So instead of negotiating aggressively, many buyers simply disengage. And that silence is not rejection. That is leverage. Now, another reason that homes are sitting is based on condition, but it's not the way most people think. It's not about buyers being picky or expecting perfection. It's about the financial reality of renovation in today's environment. Construction costs remain elevated. Contractor availability can still be somewhat inconsistent. Timelines unpredictable. And buyers who are relocating or purchasing a second home are not interested in managing a project from a distance. In the past, buyers were willing to accept cosmetic issues because competition forced their hand. Today, they do not have to. When a home feels like a project, even if it's a small one, buyers start doing the math instead of imagining their life there. And that shift is critical. Homes that have been updated, are neutral, and have very low friction to sell, those homes are selling, and oftentimes quickly. Homes that require decisions and upgrades or immediate work often stall, especially when they're priced similarly to those other homes. This is why two homes with the same square footage and And similar list prices can have completely different outcomes. One feels easy, the other feels expensive in ways that are not reflected on paper. And buyers will always choose the path of least resistance when they have an option to do so. Now, one of the most dangerous things you can do as a buyer here in Scottsdale is treat it as one market, because that it is not. Different neighborhoods, community types, and property uses behave very differently, especially in transitioning markets. A lock-and-leave condo attracts a completely different buyer than a family-friendly home in North Scottsdale. A golf community has a different demand cycle than a non-golf community. Properties with short-term rental appeal follow different pricing logic than primary residences. National headlines cannot capture that nuance, and even local statistics often flatten it. This is why you will see one home sell quickly with clean terms, while another nearby sits for months. It is not luck, it is alignment. When a property is priced, presented, and positioned correctly for its specific buyer pool, that home will move. When it is not, it will linger, regardless of what broader market averages suggest. This is where local insight matters more than some of that raw data. One of the quietest shifts that is happening right now is how buyers negotiate. In competitive market, negotiation is loud. Offers come in fast. Counters fly back and forth. Everyone knows what's happening. In today's Scottsdale market, negotiation is often silent. Buyers are letting listings sit. They're watching how sellers respond to time. They're waiting to see whether price reductions are going to happen and whether contracts fall apart, and to see if the seller's motivation increases. By the time many offers are written, most of the negotiation has already happened psychologically. This is not hesitation, this is strategy. And it is why buyers who understand the rhythm of this market often end up with better terms, cleaner inspections, and more favorable pricing without ever appearing aggressive. One of the least talked about reasons homes aren't selling here in Scottsdale has nothing to do with listings at all. It has everything to do with those contracts that never actually close. And here's what most buyers see from the outside. A surprising number of homes that look like they're not selling actually did go under contract and then quietly came back on the market. But the reason they came back on the market, that matters. In Scottsdale right now, we're seeing deals fall apart for 3 very specific reasons. And none of those show up in online statistics. The first is the appraisal reality. Even buyers with strong financial ability are no longer willing to bridge that unrealistic gap just to keep the deal together. Lenders are more conservative. Appraisers are using newer, softer comps. And sellers that priced for last year are running headfirst into numbers that simply don't support their asking price. When that happens, buyers are no longer panicking. They're renegotiating or they're walking away. The second reason contracts are falling apart is inspection leverage. During the peak market, inspections were rushed, minimized, or emotionally ignored. That is no longer happening. Buyers today are using inspections exactly as they were intended, as a tool to evaluate real condition, long-term maintenance, and immediate costs. And when issues come up, buyers are far less willing to absorb them quietly. This is especially true for out-of-state buyers who are relocating or purchasing a second home. They are not interested in inheriting deferred maintenance from across the country. When sellers push back or dismiss this concern, deals stall, and eventually, some die. The third reason contracts fall apart is emotional misalignment. This one almost never gets discussed, but it matters more than people think. Some sellers still believe their home is special in a way the market will reward them indefinitely. Buyers, on the other hand, are making comparative decisions across multiple properties. When a seller is emotionally attached to a number and the buyer is emotionally detached from the home, the buyer always wins because they are willing to walk. And many do. What happens next, though, is important. That home comes back on the market looking new. But buyers who are paying attention recognize this immediately. The days on market do not reset, and it will stay back on market. And now, when buyers look at this home, they immediately think, why didn't it close? What changed? What's wrong with the house? How motivated is that seller now? And this is one of the quiet ways leverage is shifting, even though the market doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Because the best opportunities right now often come from understanding why the deal failed, not just whether a home is listed. This is where local knowledge beats online data every single time. A home that isn't selling is not always a bad sign. Sometimes it's a sign that reality is finally catching up, and that's where smart buyers step in. Buyers who are winning in Scottsdale right now are doing a few specific things differently. They are separating price from value. Instead of assuming the two always align, they're paying attention to time on market and contract behavior, not just the list price. They are making decisions from a place of preparation, not urgency. They understand what compromises matter and which ones do not. They know when to wait and they know when to move more decisively. And most importantly, they are not relying on headlines to tell them what to do. They are relying on context. That is the difference between reacting to a market and navigating it well. Now, if you want to learn if Scottsdale is really right for you, you're going to want to watch this video. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.